Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pantheon Plus. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. My co-host for this week and every week is Brian. You can find him on Twitter at Brian. We are part of the Real World Podcasting Network. You can find us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. Please leave a 4 or 5-star review, as we are on Spotify and Apple, and it's extremely important that you rate and review us so that we can allow people to discover the great work that we are doing here with our own separate feed. As, of course, you should also continue to support everything that is being done with the real world. We are going to be discussing Police Story 3 Supercop, and this is a continuing evolution of the franchise that stars Jackie Chan, perhaps best known for Police Story and Police Story 2. Now we are introducing a brand new character into this film, as we, of course, are going to have Michelle Yeoh returning after a 5-year retirement. That's right. You will not see anything in her filmography from 1987 until 1992 because she was in retirement after getting married. And she comes back here to play Jessica Yang, an Interpol inspector. And that kind of leads us into what this movie is. And Brian, we are once again going to be discussing Michelle Yeoh, but I know you are very excited to also discuss Jackie Chan.
Yeah, so I did a little extra credit, and finally this was like the moment, I think, that I was able to watch Police Story 1 and 2, and then actually have and then leading into Police Story 3, so this was like the perfect time to do that. So I watched Police Story for the first time, and I'm texting Jerome, and I'm like, Jerome, Jackie Chan just got hit by a car, and then he got back up and started kicking ass. So I was just like, man, Police Story 1, I feel, is the most, the craziest stunts out of all the Jackie Chan movies I've ever seen. And I haven't seen all of them yet. And I haven't even seen Project A, which has that insane stunt where he's going from the top of the building through, those, material canvases. And then he fucking hits his head at the bottom and, breaks his neck, in real life. So, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stunts, but I think Jackie Chan in the first Police Story is the epitome of it all, the grandiose of it all, him doing the stunt with the bus and the umbrella, holding on to, hooking to a bus with an umbrella and then riding the bus as it's moving, that was incredible. And then, of course, the thing where he's jumping from the 4th floor of a mall down a pole, breaking glass and surrounded by lights and just breaking the lights. Just incredible stuff. I feel like Police Story 1 is the ultimate Jackie Chan movie. Police Story 2 kind of wants to go more grounded, and they did less stunts and kind of replaced it with more drama and police grittiness, but it still had a fun feel to it. And I even feel like Police Story 2 had a lot of influence on Bad Boys 3, because Bad Boys 3 has this focus on the young surveillance team, quote unquote, and the same thing happens in Police Story 2, where halfway through the movie he meets up with the surveillance squad, and they're all these young hip cops, you know what I mean? And I thought, hey, this is Bad Boys 3 right here. So I can see a lot of influence on modern action movies today from the Police Story movies. The thing is, I think once we go from the 80s to the 90s, it feels like there's more focus on the entertainment aspect as opposed to these insane stunts can we come up with. Even though Supercop does have a tremendously insane stunt at the end, I feel like, I don't know, based on Police Story 1, it feels like they were trying to do less crazy stunts from the get-go and kind of build up to it. And that's kind of what I felt.
I would say there's more spectacle as opposed to stunts. That is not to say that there are still risks being taken, but I feel in this movie that you are seeing a lot of explosions. You're seeing Michelle Yeoh on a bus. You're seeing Jackie Chan on a helicopter. So there's still, it's still pretty insane. And I think this would actually work a lot better now because everything is so CGI that I think this would really stand out. But for a movie like this, I think it's so much. This Yes, Madam was so much about the fighting, the action. This was much more about spectacle.
Right, and the other thing I want to mention too is that an interview that I was watching on one of those YouTube videos I found after I watched Police Story 1 and 2 is that there's a different kind of focus on the fighting. In a lot of different Jackie Chan movies, it's more martial arts, especially Drunken Master, right? That's based on actual martial arts. But what he wanted to focus on in the Police Story movies is more street fighting. And there's a difference between street fighting and martial arts, right? So street fighting is more of that grittiness. It's more like more of a struggle. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I like about the police story movies in terms of their fighting sequences, is that they're not necessarily all about the martial arts. It's about the street fighting, and then if like there's a chair in the middle of the room, they're going to use that chair. If there's a plate of glass in the corner, they're going to use that plate of glass. So I like that street fighting element to it more so than like the martial arts element, and I think that's what kind of connects with me in these police story movies more so than some of the other Jackie Chan movies. I think it's just that gritty street fighting technique that they go with, or that style, as opposed to this clean martial arts stuff. Like if you watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that is super clean and super, like, you know what I mean, like very well choreographed in terms of martial arts. But in the police story movies, it's all about like gritty street fighting and like like what happens in the moment of a fight and how do you adapt to that moment in time in the fight. And that's where you get these Jackie Chan things where it's like, we're gonna use this. I don't know. In the first movie, like he used a rack of clothing on a guy, right? In the second movie, he used like fireworks on a guy. So in this case, it's like, what do we come up with next? And so I like that aspect of the police story movies. And even though I felt like this one is not as good as the first two, this was like really fun in comparison. But I think nothing can top the first police story, to be honest, because I think that one, it was just Jackie Chan trying to go for it all, and that was one of his, like, he wanted to prove something, and then once he proved it, he kind of like, okay, what do we do next, kind of thing. But I think that first police story movie is the best one for sure, and I don't think anything can top it because of the crazy amount of stunts that were in that first movie compared to later police story movies. But I am glad that they brought some of the legacy characters back, like Maggie Chun comes back as May. You got Uncle Bill coming back. He's like the his one of his bosses that appears in the previous movies as well. So you got recurring characters coming back. So this kind of worked for me. I just felt like it wasn't like as good as the first two, but it was more of a spectacle. And I feel like this was more of a spectacle than focusing on the story. Like the first two movies kind of focused more on the story.
I think we are mostly in agreement on this one as well. I mean, I feel like it's funny. I feel like in January and February when we were having our discussion about like underrated sequels, I feel like we may have not always been on the same page with some of them, to the point where you were broken when watching Terminator. And I feel like we're on the same page with this movie as well. I think it's very enjoyable. I certainly think it is well worth a watch, just in terms of understanding who Jackie Chan is, also understanding who Michelle Yeoh is. This is also an important movie because we are getting away from, like, even though I watched the English dubbed version of this, they are slowly getting away from the dubs and more using the set that is on sound. I do want to point out, though, Brian, the good news is the English dub does have Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh's voices, so that was a positive thing.
Yeah. So okay, here's what happened with the original plan was to watch this on Pluto, right? So me and Jerome, or I started trying to watch the movie first. I'm watching the beginning, and I'm like, oh no, it's the English dub, because the beginning credits are like this weird song that they made just for the movie dub version. I was like, oh no, oh no. And then they started speaking Spanish, and I was like, ¿Qué? What is going on here? And then I realized the Pluto version of this movie they uploaded is in Spanish with Spanish subtitles, which I don't know. I don't know who thought that one out. I don't know if it's a mistake or something that no one's like reported or whatever. So if you want to watch Supercop Police Story 3 in Spanish for free on Pluto, go ahead. It's right there. So we ended up renting the movie. So I actually, in the meantime, thinking about, like, before I rented the movie on Amazon, I actually found the original Cantonese version on YouTube. But the problem was that it was like some other different subtitle, so I couldn't understand it. So I was like, how do I put this together? So I muted the TV, I raised the level of the audio on my laptop, and I ended up watching it with the original language mixed in with the visuals of the like the American cut. So the problem with that was the Supercop version in America is 10 minutes shorter. So sometimes it would kind of jump to these other scenes, like, what's going on? And I realized, oh, this is the stuff they cut. So then I would go back to the laptop, watch what was going on, even though there wasn't a correct translation, and I didn't know what they were saying. And then once it would sync back up, I would look back at the TV and everything would sync back up. So I actually got it like 100%. I sent a video to like Jerome, and I pretty much got it spot on. So I had a more enjoyable experience. Because at one point I was kind of curious, like, I wonder what music they're using right now. And then I turned it up and they're using a Tupac song. I was like, okay, listen, I love Tupac, but I do not want to hear rapping about Machiavelli right now during this Jackie Chan movie. So some of the musical choices for the American version I question, but I was kind of going back and forth between the two versions in terms of the sound because I was curious like what songs they were choosing. Because in the original they used more of that traditional police story type soundtrack, but this American version they try to make it hip, with rap and stuff. But I don't think that kind of fits with what Police Story is. So I'm glad that I kind of watched it in the original mixed with the original soundtrack, even though I would using the American version as the main visual.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. Again, if I had the opportunity to watch the Cantonese version with English subtitles, I would have. But unfortunately, I simply was just not going to do what Brian did, and I'm not saying that what he did was bad. It's just weird.
It took more time to watch the movie for sure because I was getting all alignment.
Just give me the option to watch both. Like I don't understand why this is so difficult. Like why couldn't I rent a version of this movie that is in Cantonese with English subtitles? I don't understand it. I will say the fact that it was Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh dubbing themselves made it a little bit more palpable, even though the lip sync wasn't quite right. But the fact that it was a 90-minute movie also helped. So just to get into this a little bit, this was released theatrically in the United States in 1996 with the aforementioned actors participating. Jackie Chan apparently dislocated his chin or his cheekbone during a stunt scene. And the stunts in this movie are pretty crazy. Again, with the end, I guess they got into a bit of a competition. And there was a point when Jackie Chan told Michelle Yeoh to stop competing with him. Otherwise, one of them was going to end up dead because they were going to try to top each other. And one of them was going to end up seriously dead or seriously injured. So that's pretty amusing. So yeah, Jackie Chan, he was accidentally sideswiped by the helicopter. So man, it's pretty crazy to think. Michelle Yeoh did not know how to ride a motorcycle before filming this movie, and then she was doing motorbike jump stunts. So that should tell you everything you need to know about both of these individuals. What say you, Brian?
I mean, it's not like I'm shocked because like if you watch Police Story 1 and 2, especially 1, Jackie Chan was just doing so many insane things in the first movie that it kind of goes back to that a little bit. But I felt like in the first movie, he was doing the crazy stuff right off the bat. But in this movie, they kind of build up to the insane, crazy stunt. Like they'll do some like crazy stunts in between. But the most insane thing in this movie is Jackie Chan on a fucking ladder at the bottom of a helicopter while it's like moving. And like the helicopter's moving with Jackie Chan on the ladder. So I'm thinking like, where's the thing where he can fall off in case he falls off? And by the time at the end of the sequence, I was like, there was probably none. You know what I mean? There was probably no safety jump pad at the bottom because you'd have to move it, right? You'd have to move it with the helicopter, and you can't do that. So he had to have been on the helicopter. Maybe he was strapped to it. Maybe that was the safe way they did it. Because I don't know. If he fell, he would have landed on the train. Like, there's no CGI, and he's hanging on this helicopter, and I'm thinking, like, where's the crash pad? There's got to be a crash pad here. And by the end of it, I was thinking, like, I don't think they could have. Like, literally, they could not have because where are they going to put it? He can't travel with the helicopter. So just insane craziness. Yeah, that trade sequence was just like, wow. Funny at times, too, but just wow, because Michelle Yeoh uses the motorcycle to get on there. And I was thinking, like, I don't even know how that happened, but it just happened so quickly. It's like, holy shit. And you see her on the motorcycle, and it's like, well, she did it. So, yeah, just craziness all around. The plot is okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say the plot is as good as the previous Police Story movies. And I don't know about you, but I feel like the chief inspector guy, the guy with the glasses from the first two, I thought he was kind of like missing in this movie. Like he's not in this third movie, but I felt like he was needed because he kind of brings something to the table with that role that Uncle Bill doesn't. And I felt like he was kind of missing from this movie.
Yeah, it's one more note. This is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies. He says, basically between 1990 and 92 and 2009. Like, this is one of his favorites. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, just in terms of getting into plot mechanics, this is a very drug-heavy plot, as so many American movies from the 90s and the 2000s have been. And we, of course, are dealing with the man. He is now known as a super cop of the Hong Kong police. It is not Michelle Yeoh's character. It is, in fact, Jackie Chan's character, who, depending on, he is either Kevin Chan or Chan Ka Kwai, depending on which version of this movie you're watching. So he is asked to infiltrate the Chaibot organization, and basically has to develop a completely new persona for himself in order to get in close. And he uses Michelle Yeoh's character, Jessica Yang, to kind of infiltrate things. And yeah, that's kind of what the movie is they are both together, and they end up in a brother-sister role, and there are some hijinks that ensue because May eventually sees them hanging out together and assumes that her boyfriend, in this case, Jackie Chan, cheating on her, but in fact is not. And yeah, I've seen Maggie Cheung in a number of other movies. She is kind of known for being a part of the Wong Kar-wai universe, especially the movie In the Mood for Love, which is generally regarded as probably one of the greatest movies ever made, heavily influenced Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is kind of funny given where we're at now with Michelle Yeoh. Maggie Cheung always feels like she's wasted in this role. And I'm sure she got a pretty paycheck for being in all three movies, but just May playing the damsel in distress just is kind of bizarre, kind of weird. And it doesn't really work. And again, knowing where her career kind of goes, it feels like a waste. But, I think a lot of the other performances I think are pretty solid. Jackie Chan, I think Jackie Chan is obviously a tremendous performer, but I don't know. It just feels like there is such a distance for me between what he does in terms of the action sequences and some of his actual acting. Like, it never feels like he's taking the roles totally seriously. And I think that's always what keeps me back from really embracing him as an actor. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. For me, I want to talk about Maggie Cheung because, like, in the first movie, it's the same thing. Like, she thinks that she's being cheated on, but then it's not. It's like Jackie Chan is just like doing the undercover thing and he's protecting someone. So at this point, by the third movie, when they're running that gag, I'm like, I think this gag is done. Like, they did it in the second movie as well a little bit, but yeah, I think that gag with Maggie Chung, yeah, I think that it was just kind of a waste by the third one. And what was the other point on was it Jackie Chan you were talking about?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here. Jackie Chan deserves a ton of credit for the things that he has done and the risks he's taken, but just in terms of his acting, I'm never super into it. And obviously, again, this is a dub, but even watching the original versions of Police Story in their intended languages, I've never been super into him as an actor.
It kind of depends, because I feel like in parts of Police Story towards the end of Police Story 1, where he punches the bad guy like I don't know 10 times in the stomach, and then he punches the lawyer to the point where the lawyer like breaks glass. There was the look on Jackie Chan's face that like was so intense that like you felt what he wanted to do, like even though he knew it was the wrong thing to do, and you still wanted him to punch the bad guys, like even though they were in custody already. Like, he can pull it off. It's just that he doesn't need to. It's like he's more his roles are more relied on the stunts. He's not necessarily known as like an actor, and that's fine. Like, I mean, if I were to compare acting, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger is the better actor, but I think Jackie Chan just does these stunts that are just so like incredible that he's just kind of like you're drawn to him. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily the acting. But I see your point, because like I don't think Jackie Chan is like this amazing actor either, and but he's got this great on-screen presence, and persona, and the fact that like he sings songs for his own movies, like that to me says something about the guy himself, where he feels like he's so well-rounded that he can sing the song and pull it off. And I felt like the Police Story theme song that I kept playing over and over after I watched the first two movies, like it's one of these classic bangers that people don't even know about, and Jackie Chan singing it from the '80s. And it sucks they didn't bring that song back in the in Police Story 3, because even in the original Cantonese version, he sings a new song, and it's like, okay, it's got like, we're in the '90s now, it's like a new era. So I kind of get why he did that. But in terms of his acting, he's never been that kind of actor. And I haven't seen more of his recent stuff recently, but I'm sure he's gotten better because he can't necessarily do all those stunts anymore. I don't know, because it makes me wonder, like in the original casting choice for Everywhere All at Once, like he was supposed to be the husband, and he declined. So I kind of wonder in this alternate universe, would he have gotten the nomination as well? If
I don't
I don't,
think he would have
I
gotten
don't
the
think he would have.
nominations.
Yeah,
I don't think the movie would be as well regarded either. Like, I think it would have been notable because Michelle Yeoh and Jackie Chan would have done this movie together. But I even think too the remake of the Karate Kid. Have you seen the remake of Karate Kid?
God no. Man,
I know you
that
have
goes back to the
I know
blockbuster
you have a
days.
weird thing against that entire franchise, but I'm referring to again the remake that had Jaden Smith.
Oh, I know. I never watched it, but a lot of my coworkers at Blockbuster at the time played it on loop because it was one of those safe movies you can just play on loop. And people kept questioning me, like, do they even have karate in China? And I was like, don't ask me. I don't know. Like, yeah, there was some weird cultural switches in that movie
I
that I
mean,
was.
Bruce Lee is from Hong Kong, so yes, they do.
I don't know. It was supposed to be Japanese, right? So the switch kind of threw me off, but I don't know. One of those
It's a weird thing.
things.
The point that I'm trying to make is that I think that's the kind of movie. Okay, you cast Jackie Chan to play this, to play this specific kind of role, and I just didn't buy it. Like I always thought, Pat Morita was a significantly better version of Mr. Miyagi. Like there was never any doubt in my mind who was better, and I think that the fact that Jackie Chan, I don't know, like just him as an actor just never really does it for me. And like even when he is like when he has to infiltrate the organization and he has to play like this undercover criminal, like the sequence when he escapes with Panther, like some of the physical stuff is great. Like when they have to go down that mountain and they get on the wire, so to speak, and they kind of have to fly down. Like that is a great piece of filmmaking because like you actually see them on it and like they're flying down and there's no CGI. Like I don't know how they did it, but it definitely felt dangerous and risky. And I think that's what you want from a Jackie Chan movie. And when they're going up and like I guess for lack of a better term, like the coal mine, and they're kind of going up and down there, like there's some fun sequences. And when they later go into the village, and there's some hijinks and a little bit of cross-dressing. Like there's some funny moments. And again, I think this movie is very watchable. The 90-minute runtime helps tremendously for that reason. But again, I think it just feels like Michelle Yeoh, in terms of performances, Michelle Yeoh is the only one that I feel like is actually invested in playing this role and taking it seriously.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens with like these Jackie Chan movies in the '90s. Like I kind of felt like that. Like as much as I enjoyed Rumble in the Bronx and Jackie Chan's First Strike when those came out in American releases, they're not nearly as good as the Police Story movies. You know what I mean? And I just watched those recently. So there's something there. Like I felt like in the '90s there was like this shift in focus from like the gritty storytelling aspects and more focus on the stunts. And I think that's what we get here because the story is kind of just a whatever story in this one. It's not really like a personal story. They're called in for some other thing and going on in China. You know what I mean? Some other problem. It's not like a personal story that was affecting him in Police Story 1 and 2. So that's kind of where I'm at that in terms of the story. Like it's not affecting him personally that way. That's why I kind of have this thing about the plot where it's not necessarily a good plot that really connects with Inspector Chan. Um, so yeah, it kind of has its moments, but I felt like Michelle Yeoh, you're kind of right on that point. She's kind of like the only one taking it seriously because especially at the beginning, like when they first meet, she's like very serious in that getup in the in the uniform, and then he's just trying to have fun with her, and then you can tell like with that dynamic, like she's really the one doing the acting, and he's just there having fun. So I guess it kind of works for what this movie is. Like it's a fun movie. It's just it feels like it's like damn, it's like it's not nearly as good as it could have been, especially if you watch Police Story 1 and 2 beforehand, like right off the bat. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the plot. Because really, it's just like they break a guy out, he goes undercover, and then they turn on him, and then they just kill the guy. So that's pretty much it.
I mean, I
And
will say, I think you're underselling Act 3 a little bit. I do think that just in terms of the spectacle part of things, with Michelle Yeoh on that motorcycle for an extended period of time, I think that does work. Again, you've got Jackie Chan on a helicopter. So the spectacle stuff, in some ways, I think helps the movie, elevates it. I think in other ways, I think it hurts the movie. So I think that's kind of where I'm at in terms of this movie. I think it's very complicated to talk about because I think there are a lot of really positive things to say about it, and I think this movie overall is worth watching. But this movie also it definitely has some glaring imperfections, and I think some of that comes down to the acting and the plot. And again, I would love to see the maybe watching the original, the Cantonese version would enhance my viewing of this movie. Because, Jackie Chan is not speaking in his second language. He'd be speaking in his first. So maybe that would change my perception of this a little bit. But, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, the third act of this movie alone is worth watching.
yeah, I would say that for sure. The other thing that I kind of was like iffy about was like the Uncle Bill character. I felt like he had so much to do in the first two movies, and then he's in the beginning of this one, and then they bring him back as undercover playing an old woman in the middle. I was like, oh, this is gonna get really good now because he's a really funny comedy actor, and he was so funny, especially I think in Police Story 2, when he was having these stomach issues and he was constantly going to the bathroom in the second movie. In this case, I was like, okay, they're setting something up for something really funny, and then he just disappears. So I'm like, ah, man, like what? I don't know what happened there, but I wanted more of the Uncle Bill character because I feel like he brings the right amount of comedy to a serious situation and then balances it out. You know what I mean? Like, especially in the first two movies, especially the second movie, like he was really like so like at a place with his stomach issues, but it like somehow he was kind of like making the seriousness of the plot kind of like level out a bit so you can kind of have that levity. I just wanted more of him, and I felt like they kind of shortchanged him, especially like if you're setting him up to do undercover work and he's dressing as the grandma, there's got to be a payoff to that, right? And there was no payoff to it. And I was like, damn, because even in the original cut, like the 10 minutes they cut for the original version, he's not in those 10 minutes that they cut. So I don't know. I felt like they kind of shortchanged him, and that's the last time we see the Uncle Bill character. And I just thought, man, what a way to like kind of disservice the character a little bit, because if that's the last time we see him, it sucks because like he never gets like an arc. He doesn't get like his own thing. Like he's kind of there as like a joke, dressing as an old woman. But I felt like he had so much more to do in the first two movies. So that kind of threw me back a bit because I felt like this is kind of where they're shifting from like the 80s police story movies to the 90s police story movies, where it's more focused on the entertainment as opposed to the plot. And I don't know if that it's kind of like a symbol of that, or like a, an example of that. And yeah, I just wanted more of him. And then again, I mentioned earlier that the original chief superintendent is not in this movie. It's a new character, and he's the same guy from Bloodsport. So it was just so weird. I felt like that other guy was needed because I'm talking about the guy with the glasses, because I felt like he brought something to the table as well. So I felt like taking those elements out definitely changed the mood of what the police story movies are.
I can see that. And I will say there is a fourth police story movie that comes after this without Michelle Yeoh that is called First Strike. There's also
I saw that in theaters, and I didn't know it was a police story movie until like a month ago.
And there is also a Michelle Yeoh sequel, Supercop 2, which we are not going to discuss, but I thought it was worth noting that there is a sequel to that movie too. There are two sequels to this movie, and it gets very confusing with like spin-offs and sequels and whatnot, but those are kind of the follow-up.
Yeah, Supercop 2 is what we call in the industry the Hobbs and Shaw of the franchise.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to classify it. So for me, the strength is in the stunt work. Especially, I think the third act is pretty unforgettable. I do think Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh have some good chemistry together, just in terms of the way that they are able to play off of each other. I wish we had almost gotten to see more of them fighting together. I do think the setting and scale, I think, are very good. We haven't really talked about it, but like This is not a movie where it's taking place in an apartment, an airport, and a police station. Like they are outside. They are in some of
It's not even in Hong
little
Kong.
homes.
It's not in Hong Kong in the first two movies either.
Right, and it is worth pointing out, like there are parts of this movie that are shot in Shanghai and other places. So I think that's pretty cool. Like I think you see the scale a lot more. I also love that this is a tight 90 minutes. I think the 95-minute version also would have worked. But again, I love the fact that we are reviewing 4 movies this month that are all 90 to 95 minutes. It's great.
Yeah, so there's also some subtext that I think kind of gets lost, but they mentioned it a little bit, and I mentioned it last week with the Hong Kong thing. Like, there's these subtle jokes about how like things are different in Hong Kong versus outside of Hong Kong because Hong Kong is controlled by Great Britain at the time, and they even mentioned like a joke about how things are going to change around 1997. Did you notice that? So I was like, oh, they knew the change was coming, of what was to come.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know when the announcement was made, but yeah, I remember this being a thing. Even 12-year-old me remembers the transfer from Great Britain to China.
So yeah, that kind of plays into it as well. I think there's like some context there because like she's like working for China and he's working for Hong Kong. So like immediately when they meet, like she's dressed in the uniform and he's just like casual. So I was like, oh, there's something to this that they're kind of like commenting on, but they're not fully going with it. So I was like, I don't know if they would have gone with more with that.
I mean, this is something that you and I, as American audiences, probably are not going to get that subtext as much as audiences who live in mainland China or who live in Hong Kong.
I guess that's it, but I just felt like there was something there that could have been really like interesting to tell, but it's not the type of movie to tell that in. So
especially given Jackie Chan's political beliefs and wanting to be a part of the communist government. Yeah, I can't imagine that the subtext would work.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting, but they never really got into it. So I thought that was like a good, like if you want to kind of get a good idea of that, I guess watch Rush Hour. Like that's the full, like, I mean, that shows you post of Hong Kong. So this is pre and post. Like if you kind of compare it, like, I guess that would be the example, but
that is one thing you could do. You could
do that.
Certainly watch Rush Hour. I mean, not the worst idea, but not the best one either, I would say.
I mean, it's one of my childhood favorites, so there you go. But yeah, there's a lot of subtext in here that I kind of feel like gets overlooked. But again, it's very subtle, and I get why they do it, and I get why they don't go into it fully. So there's that aspect to it, and yeah, there's something about like, because I've even like on the YouTube videos, I've seen some like really like you know kind of snarky comments like, remember when Hong Kong cinema used to be cool? I was like, oh, that's kind of insulting, man. Don't say that. But I get where these people are coming from with those comments. So,
all right, weaknesses. I consider this movie to be a waste of Maggie Cheung. It's just really unfortunate given some of the other work she's done. Much more spectacle, less action oriented, I would say. And again, I think there are positives and some weaknesses. The plot is a bit convoluted as well, especially when May gets involved and she gets captured. Yeah, drug dealing plots I think can get very convoluted at times, and I think this is a really good example of that.
I feel like I don't know, because like Maggie Cheung is doing the same shtick from the first two movies. She should know by now that he's probably not cheating on her, and that he's probably on a case. Because like, why would he be in the same area as you, cheating on a girl when he just told you he was on a case going away for a month? So there's this kind of gaps in logic with that character that I guess she forgets or whatever. She's easily, I don't know, convinced that she's being cheated on, because that is a thing that happens in the first two movies without a doubt. Especially the first movie where she throws a cake in his face during his birthday because he brings home an eyewitness and she thinks that she's cheating on him, or he's cheating on her with that woman, and nope. And he gets cake in the face twice. He gets caked in the face twice in that movie. So yeah, it's just kind of a like, okay, what are we doing here? And I'm glad she's back. I felt like they should have evolved her character a little more and not make her like the tropey damsel in distress, because I joked with Jerome, I was like, here we go again. She's like MJ, and in the first three movies she gets caught and kidnapped and put in peril, but she's definitely the MJ of this franchise. Unfortunately, like, they could have like give her an arc, but they really didn't throughout the three movies, which is unfortunate because she's pretty much acting the same as the first two movies, which sucks. But so yeah, we're kind of on the same page. The only change I actually would have made is actually make Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh actual brother and sister, and I think that would have made it more interesting. Because then if you have this brother and sister from two different parts of China, the Hong Kong and the mainland China, there's another story you can tell there because of their differences, right? So there's so many things you could have done with the plot, but they just made it, they simplified it to the point where it's all about the stunts and action. So that's kind of where I'm at. I felt like Police Story
Or
1 and
have them be
2,
cousins, perhaps.
something like that,
Some
something, but they're
familial.
actually related. Because I think that would have.
I don't think that in terms of divorce, like I don't think you could do like stepbrother, stepsister, half brother, half sister. I don't think that would necessarily work for the culture, but I do think them having some familial relations would have helped in some way. I could definitely agree with you on that. In terms of the MVP, so I'm giving the MVP award to Jackie Chan. I think if you are talking about a Jackie Chan movie, even if he is not the director, he is the reason that the movie works. So just in terms of, again, that spectacle aspect of things, I'm definitely going to give him the MVP award. And I would assume that he had a lot to say about his own co-star, in this case, Michelle Yeoh, who once again, of course, is the best performance. It's her month, so she might get the clean sweep. But that is those are my picks for the awards.
My picks as well, and Jackie Chan actually didn't direct this one. I think it was Stanley Tong, I think, because at one point,
yeah, I know he's not the director, but I think whenever you're talking about a Jackie Chan movie, he has a lot of influence.
Well, actually, I mentioned that because a lot of people don't know that he directed the first two Police Story movies and a bunch of other 80s stuff, but then he kind of transitioned to just being the star in the 90s. And again, I kind of talk about this transition of like Jackie Chan from the 80s to the 90s, where he's not necessarily directing his own stuff anymore, but he's still doing the crazy stunts. And I feel like there's less focus on the plot in these 90s movies compared to the 80s movies, which is an example here. And then, it's kind of like he transitions to giving Stanley Tong the directing gig as opposed to him doing all the directing. So there's this transition. And I think this is kind of the movie that kind of shows that transition to the 90s era of Jackie Chan. And because I would say like Armor of God and like Operation Condor kind of fit the 80s because they were filmed in the 80s but released in early 90s here in America. And I would say that that kind of sticks in that 80s Jackie Chan era. But this is kind of that 90s era of Jackie Chan where it's, again, focusing on the stunts, being more Americanized, try to go beyond the Hong Kong cinema, kind of, explore a little more. So I kind of get that from this movie. I'm glad it's 90 minutes. But again, I would say Police Story 1 and 2 kind of topped this by far a lot.
All right. So next week, Brian, this is a movie that you have wanted to talk about for quite some time. We are going to be talking about the Heroic Trio. We are going to get a reunified Michelle Yeoh and Maggie Cheung. They are both a part of this movie. It is a superhero movie, but we are not going to be determining its Pantheon eligibility because we are just going to be discussing it, just like we are discussing all of Michelle Yeoh's movies, by going over some notes, strengths, weaknesses, all that good stuff. But this is one that I know you are very, very excited to finally watch and talk about.
I have not seen this movie at all. I've only seen like clips and like a trailer on YouTube and some stills, but it just looks like this epic fantasy movie from a different era that, God, that's something I love to go back and look at these type of movies. Just like someone else's interpretation of a superhero movie in the early 90s mixed with like Hong Kong type cinema and the action stunts and sequences that you can do at the time. Like it just kind of feels like it's the perfect mix of what I would watch. And I didn't even hear about this movie until like 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm really excited to finally check this out. And one of the characters is called Wonder Woman. So again, we're playing kind of with loose IP copyrights here. So I'm looking forward to it. Michelle Yeoh plays the Invisible Woman. So we're going to have some fun here. And because if you look at the poster, these costumes are just wild. And you can kind of tell like maybe the Matrix kind of took some influence from that and just made them all black. But you could tell like some of the leather and some of the way they're dressed. Yeah, it's going to be a fun visual of like good time, I think. And I'm really looking forward to it. And we got a heroic trio of 3 women who are superheroes in Hong Kong cinema.
All right, so those are our thoughts for Brian. My name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.
So was Inspector Chen the same Inspector Chen from Bloodsport? Because that means Bloodsport and the Police Story movies are in the same universe.